من التزم السلفية حصل الخير كله وحصل أجرا عظيما وفيرا كبيرا لأنه لزم هدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم.
بسم الله. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So we continue this week with some of the principles and foundations of da'wah. And this is, of course, from the most important aspects of the life of the Muslim. So we're going to mention a couple of things today. And we're going to start with some advice about da'wah from one of the mashaykh. And then we're going to mention about 15 points, short points of da'wah. فَأَقُولُ بِاللَّهِ التَّوْفِيقِ. This first introduction that we're going to mention is by a scholar that most people are familiar with, one of his famous works. His name is Sheikh Dr. Sa'id Ali Al-Qahtani. He is the author of Fortress of the Muslim. He was from the Salafi scholars. He is from the students of Sheikh bin Baz. He sat with him for over 20 years. He's also from the students of Sheikh Fawzan. And he passed away, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy upon him. And he left behind a lot of works. And from those works is that he authored several books about giving da'wah. And these books, well, alhamdulillah, are being translated at the moment. He authored a book about how to give da'wah to the atheist. Another book, how to give da'wah to the Jew and the Christian. Another book about how to give da'wah to a pagan. And another book about how to give da'wah to a sinful Muslim. So we're going to begin by reading the introduction for these books. The Shaykh, may Allah Ta'ala mercy upon him, he said, the wise caller, meaning the da'i. The wise caller is the one who studies reality, circumstances, the conditions of the people and their ideologies. Consequently, he would deal with the people according to their status. So the wise caller will invite the people according to the level of their intellect, understanding their disposition, their morals, and their academic and social standing. For this reason, Ali ibn Abi Talib, may Allah Ta'ala be pleased with him, he said, حَدِّثُ النَّاسِ بِمَا يَعْرِفُونَ وَتُحِبُّونَ أَن يُكَذِّبَ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. He said, speak to the people according to their level of understanding. Do you like that Allah and His Messenger would be rejected? And Aisha, may Allah Ta'ala be pleased with her, she said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam commanded us to deal with the people according to their status. And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, may Allah Ta'ala please with him, he said, you will not speak to a people with a narration that their minds cannot comprehend, except that it will be a fitna, a trial for some of them. So therefore, we have to speak to the people according to their understanding, right? And so the Prophet ﷺ, he clarified this when he said, Mu'adh ibn Jabal to Yemen, he said, إِنَّكَ تَأْتِي قَوْمٍ مِّنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ. Indeed, you are going to the people for the people of the book. So therefore, he explained to Mu'adh the creed of the people that he was going to, so he could know their condition and prepare for them and address them in a suitable manner according to what would benefit him. Now, look at how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam implemented this himself. When he said to his wife, our mother Aisha, may Allah Ta'ala please with her, he said, oh Aisha, if it were not that your people had recently left disbelief, meaning the Quraysh, if it wasn't that they were new Muslim, I would have surely dismantled the Kaaba and made for it two doors, a door for the people to enter and a door for them to exit. So he was going to redesign the Kaaba, but he knew it would be a fitna for these people who were new Muslim. Therefore, he neglected this benefit to save the people from falling into fitna. Thus, the study of the environment, meaning the situation and the area that you're going to give dawah, is extremely important. So the caller, the da'i, needs to be aware of the situation of those he is calling in terms of their creed, their psychological, social, and economic state. And he must have a good understanding of the centers and hubs of misguidance and the deviant citizens that he's going to interact with. He needs to know their language and even their slang. He should know their language and even the slang that they use. And he should know their habits. He should comprehend their problems, their moral tendencies, and their culture. And he should know their level of debate and doubts that are spread in their community and the various sects. He goes on to say, so if the caller is not aware of these things, then he will not be successful. He needs to know, is he giving dawah to a community of sinful Muslims or a community of Muslims with widespread bid'ah and deviance? Is it a community for the people of the book? Are they, if they are people of the book, are they Jews and Christians? Are they atheists or secularists or idol worshippers? He said, so if the caller knows all of these things, then how does he give dawah? What does he begin with? He said the wise caller is like a wise doctor who diagnoses a patient. He knows the disease and he pinpoints it. Then he gives medicine which is appropriate for the situation of the patient and his illness, considering the strength and weakness of the patient and his ability to bear the treatment. So now, are we going to give some points of dawah? Some of these is written by Sheikh Saleh, some of the points of dawah. One thing he mentions, he said, when giving dawah, you should never lose hope that the people you are trying to give dawah to are going to accept the call. He said, never lose hope. You find sometimes that a person may not even give dawah to people in their family or people they know because they say these people are too hard against Islam or they are too old. I'll give you an example from our community. We had a sister from our community here in North Carolina in the United States of America who embraced Islam around the age of 94. 94 years old, she embraced Islam. And she practiced for a number of years before she passed away, around about a year or so ago. May Allah Ta'ala have mercy on her. So the average person may have thought, why would I give dawah to a woman who's 94 years old? But her family, many of them were Muslim. They continued to give her dawah and she embraced Islam. And she was a practicing Muslim. So never lose hope. Allah Ta'ala will guide whomever he wants to. Okay, another point, he said, your obligation is to call others, not the end result. So you give the dawah and Allah Ta'ala is going to make the result come about. He said, but one thing that's important is that you have to understand the dangers of disbelief and its consequences. And if you understand how dangerous disbelief is, it is going to push you to strive even harder in your dawah. And so, what does this mean? You have to understand that if people die upon disbelief, they are going to the hellfire. Unfortunately, you have many interfaith groups who they believe that the Jews and Christians and the people of the book, everybody's going to paradise. So if you believe everyone is going to paradise, then why will you be diligent in giving dawah? So you have to understand that Islam is the only religion Allah Ta'ala is going to accept. And then you'll know if people die without Islam, that they're going to the hellfire. So this is going to push you to be more diligent in giving your dawah. Another very important point is that he said it is from the deception of shaitan that the people will say it's enough that I give a good example to the non-Muslims. You find many people saying what? I give dawah with my actions. They work with the non-Muslims. They have non-Muslim friends and family, but they never actually tell them what Islam is. They never actually invite them to Islam, but they say, I'm giving dawah with my actions. This is a big mistake. This is a big mistake. And one thing that you have to realize is there are many Christians and Jews and pagans that have good manners. So what will separate the Muslim with good manners from the non-Muslim with good manners? It is at-tawheed, monotheism. So you cannot just rely on your good manners. I know an individual, and I know him personally, and he has exceptional manners. But he said that he had one regret. When someone that was close to him passed away, and he said he regretted never really giving them dawah, but only showing them his good manners, because he realized that his good manners, it had an effect upon them, but it still did not let them know the meaning of La ilaha illallah. So you have to actually give dawah. And of course, when giving dawah, you show good manners and you pick the appropriate time and place to give dawah, right? So it's not always that you give people dawah all the time, but you have to pick the appropriate time and place. Another point is that he says the non-Muslims are different. This is something which we alluded to in the beginning. So your dawah has to be different. The way that you speak to the person has to be different. An educated person is not like someone who's uneducated. Different people have different cultures, and everyone has to be dealt with according to their background and understanding. Another point that he makes, he says, a good way to reach the heart of a non-Muslim is to explain the beauty and virtues of Islam. And this is why you find in the book, most of the book was taken from the ways that the ulama explained for us to give dawah, like Sheikh Uthaymeen, Sheikh Fawzan. And one of the things that they say is that we have to explain the beauty of Islam, some of the good points of Islam that would touch their heart, some of the values and morals, like being kind to the neighbor, honoring the parents, being kind to animals, not insulting the deceased, all things that they find are negative about their culture. We have to bring them and show them that Islam doesn't allow these negative things, okay? But now the next point that he mentions is very important in relation to the last point. He said, from the mistakes of giving dawah is some people suffice in mentioning the good points of Islam without encouraging the person to actually embrace Islam. Okay, so this is another bad point, right? A person will explain to the person how beautiful Islam is and how Islam is the truth, but they will not follow it up with saying, why don't you embrace Islam? So the Sheikh says you have to understand that a person who appreciates the good points of Islam, that doesn't always necessitate that they are going to embrace Islam. So you're going to have to, when you're giving dawah, after you have explained to the person what we believe, say to the person, so would you consider embracing Islam? Why don't you embrace Islam? And this is what the Prophet ﷺ would say to the pagans. He would say, Aslam. He would say, embrace Islam. He would tell them straight out, clear and concise, embrace Islam. And this is what he would do when he would write his dawah letters to the leaders of other countries. He would say to them, embrace Islam and you shall be safe. Embrace Islam and you shall receive your reward and the reward for all those who follow you from your people. So one thing that we see here that relates to this point is many people, many times on social media will find a non-Muslim who praises Islam. We'll find a non-Muslim who says that Islam is the correct religion. But although they say this, they never embrace Islam. But the Muslim will get very excited about that. But that's just like Abu Talib, the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ. He knew Islam was the truth. He wrote poetry about it. He even defended the Prophet ﷺ. But what did the Prophet ﷺ tell us about him? He said he will be in the lowest depths of the hellfire, but he's still going into the hellfire because he never embraced Islam. So we should not suffice with being happy when the non-Muslims appreciate Islam, but we should go to these same people and tell them, if you believe Islam is the truth and you praise it and you appreciate it, then you need to embrace Islam. So just keep that in mind. When giving your dawah, there has to come a point that you say to the person you're giving dawah to, embrace Islam. Take your shahada, okay? Another point, he says, it may be from wisdom with some Muslims, especially those Muslims who are arrogant and those people who like to attack Islam, that you cause them to doubt their religion before you even discuss Islam, right? And we find, an example, like with the atheists, right? You find many times that the atheists will have the Muslim on the defensive, and he'll have the Muslim trying to explain our belief, and they have never been told to explain their belief, right? So they are the ones that have to explain how an entire universe came into existence without anyone to create it, right? And this is one of the things mentioned by Sheikh Saleh al-Sheikh, right? He says that the atheists, they challenge the Muslim. They say, okay, you believe that there is a God who always existed without a beginning. And they make it seem like that's far-fetched. But they are the same people who believe that there was always a small pin particle sitting out in the middle of nowhere that always existed, because they believe this pin particle exploded into the Big Bang Theory. So this pin particle always existed without a creator. So why don't you believe that Allah always existed without a creator? See, so their whole argument doesn't make sense. So the Muslims, sometimes you have to make them, you explain that to me. Just like you may be giving dawah to a Christian and they want you to explain, how can you men have 4 wives? Well, you explain to me how you can have 3 gods first. If you explain to me how you can have 3 gods, then I explain to you how I can have 4 wives. But you can explain that to me, and that's more important. So don't always be on the defensive. Sometimes you have to explain to them why what they believe doesn't make any sense. Another point that he makes is you have to explain the difference between Islam and Muslims, because many times what will prevent a non-Muslim from embracing Islam is the negative image of Muslims, right? It can be something major like the terrorists, the Khawarij that the people see on the television, these people who are blowing up things, harming non-Muslims. That can be something that keeps people from wanting to embrace Islam. Or it can be something as small as an interaction that they have with a Muslim that was negative. And as I mentioned last week, you have to understand that many times they hold us to a higher standard than they hold themselves. So they may do something negative, but if you do it, then it's going to be blown out of proportion more than what they did. So you have to explain to them, okay, Islam is perfect. As for Muslims, we are human beings like everyone else. We make mistakes like everyone else. Okay. Another point that he makes, he says that you can use the scientific miracles found in the Quran and the Sunnah as an effective avenue to to invite non-Muslims, but you can't get too deep into it, right? You can mention some things from scientific miracles, right? Sheikh Fawzan, for example, he mentions how the verse that mentions that when the people, those who are taken up to the sky, to the heavens, they are not able to breathe, and how this was not known up until recent time. But he doesn't delve into it too much, right? Because, and this goes back to knowing your audience. If you're talking to someone that's a scientist, You don't want to get too deep into science, because even if they're wrong, they have the credentials to make it seem like you're wrong. So you have to know your audience. Who are you able to discuss scientific miracles with, and who should you avoid getting into that conversation with? Also, another point that he mentions is that he said there are some doubts regarding Islam that prevent people into entering Islam. Now, there's a nice book written by the Salafi Sheikh from Yemen, Sheikh Ali Al-Hudayfi. This is not the famous reciter, but this is one of the Mashaykh from Yemen. And he has a book, and the brothers at Impubs have been going through this book with him for the last year. He's explaining this book. And this book is also going to be translated, and it's called The Doubts Surrounding Islam. So there are a lot of doubts that people have that you're going to have to explain to the people, because there's some doubts that you're going to find yourself back into a corner, and you're going to have to discuss these doubts. So some of the major doubts, you want to study them before you put yourself in a situation of giving dawah. Another point that he mentions, he said that you should not enter yourself into a discussion that you're not qualified for, because this can cause more harm than good. So you have to know the difference between giving dawah and getting into debates. If you get into a debate, you have to be qualified for it. So sometimes your role may be just to pass out dawah material and not get into a big debate or discussion with someone, right? And the next point that he mentions, very important, he says you have to avoid entering subjects that a non-Muslim will not be able to comprehend. For example, the punishment for adultery and fornication, or even the issue of polygamy. These are things that the non-Muslim would not be able to understand, and it's not important that they know that before they know at-Tawheed, right? And so one thing you have to always do, you have to always try to take people back to the conversation of Tawheed. I remember I was some years back, we were at the local library, and I was giving dawah. And I really don't like going out to the public settings, because you never know who's going to enter into that crowd and want to have a debate or say something that may be kind of strange. And it actually happened that day. A man came, and I'm not sure if he had some mental situations going on, but I could tell that he was sincere in his questioning. I mean, Allah Ta'ala knows best. So he was asking me some various questions about Islam, and then he asked me a question that was a strange question. So I just turned the question around. He asked me if Elvis Presley was still living. He said, do Muslims believe that Elvis is still living? And I responded to him by saying, I don't know, but if you see him, tell him that nothing has the right to be worshipped except for Allah Ta'ala, and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah Ta'ala. And I began to talk about Tawheed, explaining to him, okay, if you want to know if he's still alive, I don't know, but if you see him, I'm going to tell you what you need to tell him and what you need to know yourself. So everything, we need to switch it back to Tawheed. Everything. Are there marshals in our space? I don't know, but if they are, then Allah is their Lord also, because he's the Lord of the Alameen, everything that exists. So everything, you switch it back to Tawheed. If someone asks a strange question, be prepared to switch it back to Tawheed, all right? Now, the next point that he mentions, something which is very prevalent, very prevalent. He says, you find that, and you have to make a distinction between these two, right? Sometimes a non-Muslim will come and they'll ask you, they'll say, I want to know more about Islam. If they say they want to know more about Islam, you explain to them what we believe. But sometimes a non-Muslim will come and they'll say, I want to embrace Islam, right? I want to embrace Islam. And many times people don't let them embrace Islam. They'll say to them, are you sure? Maybe you should study more. SubhanAllah. Or they'll tell the person, well, wait until Jumu'ah, come back on Friday, so you can take Shahada in front of everyone. And this is a crime. Because one, you don't know if the person is going to live till Friday. or you don't know if the person is going to change their mind by the time Friday comes around. Sheikh Abdul Qadir, he said, if someone comes and wants to take shahada and you delay them doing so even for a second, you are doing something haram, because it shows or it implies that you are pleased with that person remaining upon kufr for another second. Person wants to take shahada, you say, are you sure? You know, just be careful, because you want to make sure that you're making the right decision. SubhanAllah. Like, you're Muslim, but you're asking them if they are sure that they want to become Muslim. Or you tell them, well, come back next week, or come back on Friday, we have a crowd. Like, no. If a person comes and wants to take shahada, you don't need any witnesses at all. You don't have to do it on Jummah. I want to embrace Islam. You say, repeat after me. There's nothing deserving of worship except Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. That's it. Very important that you don't delay that at all, right? Now, and of course, you know, you want to make sure that the person knows what they're saying, and this is from the benefits that the person can say it in their own language, so the person knows what they're saying, all right? Also, there are things that we should prioritize when giving da'wah. And the first thing is tawheed, oneness of Allah Ta'ala and the Prophet ﷺ, and things like that. But you don't want to focus on, okay, well, if a person wants to become a Muslim, okay, well, you have to stop drinking first. Well, do you have a girlfriend? Or go get circumcised. Sheikh Fawzan, they asked him a question. They said, we have a new Muslim who just became Muslim, but he likes to drink. So we're afraid to tell him to stop drinking. What should we do? We're afraid he may apostate. And Sheikh Fawzan said, no, In Shā Allāh, he's not going to apostate. He said, just be patient with him. Just be patient with him. Major sins, they may fornicate, they may drink alcohol, they may do drugs, they still can embrace Islam. They are still allowed to embrace Islam and leave the most egregious sin. Because if a person dies worshiping other than Allah Ta'ala, إِنَّهُ مَنْ يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ الْجَنَّةَ وَمَأْوَاهُ النَّارُ. Indeed, whoever associates partner with Allah, then Allah has made paradise haram for them, and their abode shall be the fire, right? But if a person embraces Islam and then he dies upon another sin, he is beneath the will of Allah Ta'ala. If Allah wants you, forgive him. If Allah wants you, will punish him. So you find this also with the women, right? A woman comes and wants to take shahada. You say, well, you have to wear hijab first. You have to wear niqab. You have to put gloves on. No. The person takes shahada first, and then they begin to learn about the religion, and you have to be patient with the people. You have to be, and this is another thing that you find when celebrities embrace Islam. You find a famous athlete, a famous singer, a famous ball player will embrace Islam, right? And everyone is excited for about a week. And then if the person continues with some of those sins, then we hate them the very next week. You have to be patient with the people. We have been Muslim for a long time, and we are still trying to get ourselves together. So imagine a new Muslim who comes into the deen with, a lot of baggage. So just be patient with the people, right? Another point that he makes as we get to the end, he says every translated book is not appropriate to distribute to a non-Muslim. So you have to make sure that you give the person the right book, right? Sometimes, and this was one of the reasons for putting together the Dawah book. And our brother Ustādh Anwar Wright, may Allah Ta'ala honor him and preserve him, he has a tremendous book for the new Muslim, right? A tremendous book for the new Muslim that I suggest that you use that book to give to new Muslims. Every book is not suitable for the new Muslim. Some books are too intense, right? I remember I've been Muslim for maybe like a couple of months, and I tried to read the English translation of Kitab al-Tawheed, and I had no idea what I was looking at. I didn't understand anything in it, so I put it down. It was just above my head. So you have to make sure that you don't just go to the bookstore and give them any book on the shelf, but you want to give them books that they can understand, right? Give them books that they can understand. Even when a new Muslim, you can still give them the book, A Glimpse into the Religion of Islam, and they'll still benefit from that book because it's also suitable for Muslims. And like I said, the book by our brother Anwar Wright is a very good book for new Muslims also. And the brother also has recorded classes from that book also. And the last thing that we'll mention, In Shā Allāh, is something that's very important. And that is that once a person embraces Islam, we have to make sure that we follow up with the person and don't leave them to themselves, right? We have to make sure that we check on the person, that will make the person feel like family, that we, if we don't see the person after a number, of days, that we call the person and make sure they're okay, that we get them coming to the masjid, get them coming to the classes. And also, we're not prioritizing that a person change their name, right? It's not mandatory that a person changes their name when they embrace Islam. And they cannot change their family name, right? Your family name is your family name. An example, right? Sometimes you find a person, his name is Chris Jackson. He becomes Muslim and he changes his name to Muhammad Abdulaziz Akbar. This name is incorrect because it implies that his father's name is Abdulaziz. So in the Arabic language, the name that appears after your first name is assumed to be your father's name, right? So the person should never change their family name. But a person doesn't even have to change their first name unless their first name has some type of evil meaning, right? So don't focus on people changing their name, because it hurts people, right? Because many times I've seen people go home to their mother and father and they say, okay, my name was Chris Jackson, now it's Muhammad Abdulaziz. And it makes their family upset. Not only have you left our religion, but you have left our entire family. So now how is it going to give dawah to these people, right? So these subtle things can be very damaging. So don't focus on a person trying to change their name. If they want to have a name that the Muslims call them by, that's okay, but they cannot change their family name. But if they want to take a different first name, okay, it's not, something necessary, but they can do that. But still, they should not let them know, you should not make that binding upon your mother to call you that. Like my mother can call me any name that she wants to. That's why she's my mother. So I'm not going to tell my mother that you have to call me by my Muslim name, because that's your mother, right? So make sure that the new Muslim doesn't go home and make things already harder than they're going to be with his family, because it's going to be hard to give people dawah when they see these drastic changes that are not mandatory, all right? Now, so that's just some points that we wanted to mention. Anything that was correct was from Allah Azza wa Jalla. Anything that was incorrect was from myself or shaitan. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala nabina Muhammad.
Jazakumullah khairan, Ustad. Ustad, we just had 2 questions and 1 clarification, if you don't mind.
No, tafaddal.
Okay, so we begin with the clarification. You mentioned that Abu Talib will be from the lowest depths of the hellfire. So a brother was clarifying that because we read the hadith that Abu Talib will receive the least punishment. So the brothers want to clarify regarding this.
Ahsan. Okay, that's very good. Because my interpretation when I said lowest, I meant like lowest in being punished. But you're right. My statement was a bad wording of it, because lowest actually means the most punished, right? Yeah. So Jazakallah khairan, may Allah bless you, brothers, for bringing that up. What I meant by lowest, it means that he shall receive the least punishment. But that was a mistake in my English language, because lowest here means the lowest depth, which would be the most punished. Now, so Abu Talib is going to receive the least punishment in the hellfire. He's going to have 2 embers placed beneath his feet that's going to cause his brain to boil. Just so, Allah Ta'ala bless you, brothers, for that mistake that I made and correcting that. An additional benefit to that, which made me think about that, Allah bless you, is a statement made from Sheikh Uthaymeen that I never thought about before the Sheikh said it. And that's why we love the ulama, right? So he says, he mentioned that Abu Talib, the uncle of the Prophet of Islam, will have 2 embers placed beneath his feet that will cause his brain to boil. He said, so if these embers are placed beneath his feet, and which is the lowest part of his body, and they're going to cause his brain to boil, which is the top of his body, he said, what do you think is happening to everything between his feet and his brain? That is even more hot than his brain. So it's not like it goes from his feet and skips his body and goes directly to his brain. He says, but no, it's going to burn his feet and everything between his entire body. And when it gets to his brain, it's going to be boiling. But everything between his feet and his brain is going to be even hotter. Now,
Jazakumullah khairan, Ustad. So, can we ask 2 questions?
yes, please, my brother.
Okay, so the first question is, there are some, Muslims who like to argue regarding, what should we refer to the new Muslims, whether revert or convert. So, what is your advice regarding this?
Yeah, I just recently researched this issue, and it doesn't seem like there's anyone that's incorrect. Those people who refer to them as reverts, they refer to them that way based upon the narration. Everyone is born upon the fitrah, upon the natural disposition, and then his family is going to either change them into a Jew or Christian. So I researched the issue, but I didn't come to any strong conclusion, and it really doesn't matter that much. If you look at the big picture, if you call them a revert or convert, I mean, is it going to change anything? It really doesn't matter. But I haven't found any text from any hadith that refers to the people as a revert or convert. So until we can actually find a narration that specifies if they should be called a revert or convert, I don't think it is something that we should have a long debate about. The Arab language is called ahdatha bil Islam, like recently embraced Islam, so I don't think it's something that should be a big issue, because unless somebody can present a authentic text that says that we have to use one or the other, because there's proof that you can use both statements. So Allah knows best.
Barakallah fikum, Ustad. So the last question is, sometimes, we pray Salatul Jumu'ah, and after that, some of the brothers from the Jama'ah will just bring one of their maybe colleagues who are non-Muslim who want to embrace Islam. So given that we're already in the situation of after Salatul Jumu'ah, so what is common we see in most of the masajid is that they will ask the brother to come in front of the people and then to utter the Shahada. So what is the most appropriate thing to do? Should we, bring them in front of the people where they might be a bit, ashamed, being in front of the people, or should we take them, somewhere in the corner and make them utter the Shahada?
Well, as we mentioned, the first mistake is delaying it. That's really the first mistake, that if a person would actually, it should not actually be stopped and delayed. There was a Sahaba named Abu Rifa'a, and he said, his name is Abu Rifa'a. He said, I came to the Prophet ﷺ while he was delivering the Friday sermon. I said, O Messenger of Allah, a stranger has come to ask about his religion, and he doesn't know what this religion is. This was while the Prophet ﷺ was delivering the Jummah khutbah. He said, and so the Prophet ﷺ, he said, he looked at me and he stopped giving the sermon and he came to me. And he was given a chair that had iron legs. And he sat on it and he began to teach me what Allah had taught him. And then he returned to the pulpit and completed his sermon. So he was in the middle of Jummah, and a person came and wanted to know about Islam. So he stopped and began to give him dawah right there. All right. So, this shows how this is something important that you don't need to wait on, right? This is something which is very important. So this is the first mistake. that it shouldn't wait. And just something which, of course, you know, we don't want to scold the brothers who do it, because if they're doing something good, they're bringing people. So we don't want to scold them and make them say, okay, well, I'm not going to bring anybody anymore. No, we just want to advise them, look, if somebody wants to, because you really think about it, right? We're causing that person to miss out on a whole prayer. Because if we do the whole Jummah sermon and then we pray Jummah prayer, this person is praying as a non-Muslim. He misses out on that reward. Like, that's a whole prayer. So once the person wants to embrace Islam, even if it's on a Tuesday, give them Shahada, and then you can bring them to the masjid. Now, according to the person's personality, some people may like to be out in front and meet all the brothers. Other people may be too shy. So that's going to differ from person to person. If a person does not want to be out front like that, then take them to the corner. If a person doesn't mind, then you can take them out in front. But the most important thing is to advise the people, don't delay. It doesn't have to be on Jummah. You can give them Shahada on Tuesday, and then you can bring them to the masjid on Friday and introduce them to all of the brothers then.
Jazakumullah khairan, ya Ustad, for the lecture and for answering the questions. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.